Peace, 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 peace. Attempt, dua attempt.
Uja, greetings. So we've arrived at the final chapter of the of this section of the discourse. The written exchange between uh, Ab Amon and Porphyry. So recall we're talking about the significance of names and the source of names. And recall, if we go back, we spoke about the mode of speech. We went through the term of ancient, what the significance of that was. And we spoke about sacred law of tradition. And we spoke about the language that is adapted to the deities. And we took a brief look at the Hunefer papyrus. And we'll look at the Hunefer papyrus again today because Ab Amon is going to bring up another important point that was significant at the time, which is significant for us today in our understanding of the teaching and philosophy. So we'll continue. We'll go now into chapter 5. You object, however. So Ab Amon ends the prior chapter, chapter 4, with, or if any other thing pertains to the gods and goddesses, it is evident that the eternal and immutable must be allied to them. Meaning whatever is being conceptualized concerning the deities, it has to be a concept that is pertaining to the transcendental reality. So he explains that to Porphyry, and then he says, you object, however, meaning that Porphyry objects to that idea by this statement that Porphyry is making. So he's quoting Porphyry now. You object, however, that he who hears words looks to their signification so that it is sufficient, the conception remains the same, whatever the words may be that are used. So Porphyry is basically stating that the the meaning, or the significance of the name are the concept tied to the name remains the same, regardless of what the words that are used to illustrate or bring out the concept. So Porphyry is bringing forth a kind of loose philosophical idea, the kind of multifarious reasoning. He's basically saying that multifarious reasoning can be applied to the gods and goddesses. And Ab Amon thus replies to his assertion. But the thing is not such as you suspect it to be. So he's saying that it's not really what you think it is. For if names subsisted through compact, it would be of no consequence whether some were used instead of others. But if they are suspended from the nature of things, those names which are more adapted to it would also be more dear to the gods and goddesses. So we're going to stop here because we need to set up the next few sentences, which is going to be, it's going to make a powerful statement. So he's telling Porphyry, it's not what you think it is. For if names subsisted through compact, and what he means here is uh, a made-up concept or idea born from human reason, as opposed from insight into the nature of the principle of the divinity of which the name is derived. It would be of no consequence whether some were used instead of others. So what he's saying is that if these names of the gods and goddesses, these divinities, were derived from human intellect, normal human intellect, then there would be no consequence of one name or the other applied to the deities. Because as he's asserting in chapter 4, that the names of the deities are derived from metaphysical and mystic means. So if the names are derived through intellect, through conceptualization of the normal mind, then it doesn't matter what the names are. And you can use whatever name that you want. But there's some meaning, there's some deep philosophical and metaphysical principle that would be lost. It will not be the same as if the mystic and the metaphysical process was the basis of generating the names of the deities. So he goes further. But if are suspended from the nature of things, meaning if the names are derived from the nature of the cosmic forces of which the deities represent, those names which are more adapted to it would also be more dear to the gods and goddesses. So the names that are derived from the cosmic principles, the functions, the purpose, the process of the cosmic forces are more allied to the gods and goddesses as if the names were conjured through a normal intellectual process. So there needs to be insight into the nature of the cosmic forces to draw out the name of the deity. And if that process is not undertaken, what you have is what he refers to as a compact. You have some kind of a made-up idea, some kind of a made-up uh, concept, and that is multifarious. That's a kind of a reasoning with no basis in a deeper uh, esoteric reality. So you negate the esoteric process by going through the normal intellect. And if you do that, then the names of the deities are not allied to the forces, the powers, and the nature of the deities. If you go through the metaphysical process of deriving the name through mystical means, what occurs is that the names of the deities that are generated are aligned with the principle of the deity, the nature of the deity, the purpose of the deity, the function of the deity. And this is a very important point because what he's saying is that the names of the deities has to be, sorry, I think I have something in my throat this morning. The names of the deities have to be aligned with those cosmic principles for the purpose really of the practitioner's unconscious mind. And when you go through the chanting process of the Neteru, something occurs in the unconscious. And from the purpose of theurgy, the science of the temples, if you don't have the proper name of the deities, then you won't be able to generate the proper forces and energies within the temple. So you will have sort of a disjointed or disbalanced process. From this, therefore, it is evident that the language of sacred nations are very reasonably preferred to that of other men. So what Amun is saying here is that we'll stick with what we know most, which is the ancient Kemetic, the Medu Neter. Basically, what he's saying is that the names that are derived from, let's say, the Romance languages are not the same as the names that are derived from the spiritual nations, such as Kemet, such as Assyria at some point. Because, as was spoken, as I was trying to explain before last week, that the ancient Kemetic civilization was a truly a spiritual civilization, that everything was designed to bring about an enlightened society, an enlightened culture. And we don't have that now, really. The closest would be like Bhutan, or I guess Dharam Sala may have certain traces of that with the Dalai Lama living there. Hey, if you have a truly spiritual civilization, then the language that is derived from that civilization would be conjoined with the metaphysical process of the deities and the powers of the universe and forces of nature. So if you use other languages to apply labels to names of deities, it is like you know how it is when you unplug an appliance. It's there, you can see it, there's an image of it, but it has no power connected to it. So it can't be operational. Because if you, as we shown in the Hunefer papyrus, that the Medu Neter is set up in such a way that the deities have certain narratives that they speak, or certain words that are related to the deities. And so those philosophical principles or metaphysical principles or esoteric principles that are uh, that are that are being uh, uh, attributed to those deities it has to be tied to the nature and the power of the deity. And if the language is off, if you're using a kind of a language that cannot draw out the mystic or the sort of the metaphysical principle in such a way, what happens is that you would lose the vibration of the energy of the text and the principle of the deity that's infused in the text. is these texts are to be chanted. And the sounds of the chant generate a certain vibration, the sound vibration that you hear, and the subtle sound vibration that makes its way into the cells of your body. This makes its way into the DNA makeup of your body, and a very subtle vibration that makes its way into your unconscious mind. It all has to have an effect. So there's an effect in your body. There's an effect in your conscious mind. There's an effect in your subconscious mind, and there's an effect in your unconscious. And where you want the the primary effect is to be in the unconscious. And so the sounds of the neteru and the sounds of the spoken hieroglyphs, you call them that meruneter, has to be of a certain type. This is a sound vibration technology. It's not just words that are put together. And the sound vibration has the effect of generating certain energies and forces in your body and your mind. And certain of them as well have the effect of expansion in consciousness, meaning causing your consciousness, your mind to expand. So it all has to be operational. Like when they used to launch space shuttle, there's a whole technology, there's a whole system, there is a whole science behind it. And so what Abamun is speaking about here is the science of the sound of what has the most effect on the mind, especially the unconscious. So he says, to which may be added. So he says, I'm going forward, I'm going to tell you more, I'm going to add on to what I've just said. The names do not entirely preserve the same meaning when translated into another language. So this is a big point that he's making. So when the names of the deities are changed, the meaning, you lose somewhat of the meaning of the you, you 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 lose something. There's something that is lost because you may have the image and you're applying a name to the image, but you don't have the proper sound that is allied to the image, and therefore you lose something. You lose meaning and you lose esoteric meaning. You lose vibration, and you lose power. So, for example, I'm going to stop share here. I'm going to go back to the Hunefer papyrus. It's a picture I took a few years ago. So we're going to pick on the Greeks today. So for the Greeks, this deity would be Osiris, and his name is Osar. This deity would be Isis. Her name is Oset. This deity would be Nephthys. Her name is Nebuchadnezzar. So think about it. From Nebuchadnezzar to Nephthys, there's a lot that is lost there. We don't have time to go into it in detail. But Nebuchadnezzar means mistress of the house. And that idea of mistress of the house has a whole philosophy behind it. So if you say Nephthys, a whole meaning of that goddess is lost. A whole meaning, a whole philosophy, a whole metaphysical principle behind her power is lost. This deity would be, for the Greeks, Horus. His name is Heru. This deity would be a Thoth or Hermes. His name is Jehuti. This deity here and here would be, for the Greeks, Anubis, and his name is Anpu. So if you look at this from that perspective, from the perspective of the Greek names, you would lose a whole philosophy, and not only a whole philosophy, you would lose a whole esoteric, there's a mystic communication when you're looking at something like this. As was said before, these documents are created by sages. And the creation of these documents is a science, a mystic technology, a metaphysical technology. And as in the temples, when you're walking around the temples and you're seeing the images of the gods and goddesses and their actions and so forth, without anyone saying anything to you, meaning without a spiritual teacher saying anything, if you're open, if you have reached a certain level of purification, level of cleanliness, level of openness, there is something by you being in that environment that is occurring in the unconscious just by your visual perception of the scenes and the energies that they're put off and how they make you feel, and the thought process they generate inside of you. There's a whole mystic communication that's going on by simply just being in the presence of this technology that has now been in some certain circles relegated to art. This is not art from the perspective of art for art's sake. This is a technology for the mind. So when you're looking at this, and these papyrus papers are very long. uh, I believe the papyrus of Annie is something like 78 feet long, something like that. So when you're looking at this, there's a whole, well, what the sages are trying to bring out is a whole kind of communication that is occurring under the surface of the conscious mind just by looking at the scene alone, not reading the glyphs, not getting into the philosophy, just being in the presence of the document alone, something is happening. Now, if you were to go into the philosophy, go all into it, and go into the mysticism of it, the metaphysics of it, the whole philosophical principles that are being conveyed, then you augment what is already occurring just by being in the presence of it. So if you're reflecting on these deities in names that are not allied to their natures, this is what Abamun is talking about. Then what's going to happen is that there's a certain kind of underlying psychic process that is going to be lost if you're reflecting back a name to the deities in a language, or if you change the name of the deities in a language that is not reflecting the the nature of the deity, meaning the essence of the cosmic forces and powers that the deities are representing. So let's go back to the text. So again, he says, do not preserve the same meaning when translated into another language. And he's not specifically picking on any particular language. He's stating this from the perspective of changing the name and changing the when you go from Anubis to Anpu, you remove the 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 metaphysical and esoteric process that went into generating the name Anpu. That's what he's talking about. And so you have to keep in mind when this document is being written by Abamun. As I said before, there's a lot going on. People are making mistakes in the philosophy and the teaching, as Porphyry is expressing here, some misunderstandings that he has. And so think to putting yourself in Abamun's shoes, as they say. He's trying to bring clarity to a tradition that he sees that is being misunderstood and that is taken out of context. That's the problem. And so he's trying to preserve the context and give the reasons why, and not the superficial reasons, but the metaphysical reasons, the esoteric reasons why certain things that are being done are kind of uh, deleterious. Now, from the perspective of the modern day world, how things are, because the Greek names are more well known, you may use those names so people can understand what it is that you're talking about. So you may start them off with those names and then you gently say, or you may show it side by side. You may say that this name in the Greek is Anpu, in the Greek is Anubis, but in the Kemetic is Anpu. You may do things like that because the Greek names are so prevalent. So you have to work through the the issues that have been generated by people coming in and tinkering with the technology, the science, and so that we have to retinker it and try to bring it out in a way that maintains some of its power and some of its authenticity in relation to what the sages were trying to do in ancient times. Okay, so we'll stop there for today. I was looking. I think I'm going to do a detail on the Hunefer papyrus because I'm bringing it up and not doing any a detailed examination of it. But I think I will, uh, just because you might be curious, because we're just looking at it from, this kind of perspective and not really getting into the details of it. Well, probably we should. So in any way, Dua, once again for joining. My throat was giving trouble earlier, so I apologize for that. So Dua, everyone, and we'll be back again next week. Hit